Good afternoon. Welcome. Thank you for joining. We're going to give folks a couple minutes to arrive before we get started. But I will invite you, if you're able, to turn on your camera because I think we're going to be a relatively small group, and it will be nice to be able to see each other's faces. And there's definitely going to be a lot of opportunity for conversation and participation. Hi, Lauren. Great to see you. Um, Hi, Jessica. We're gonna give it a couple more minutes just for a few more people to arrive. I do invite you to turn on your camera if you're able, because I think we're gonna have a relatively small group, and it will be great to see each other's faces. Um, and Lizzie just dropped in the chat the deck, and then we're also inviting people to share your name and your where you're joining from and your favorite winter beverage. Um, Hi, Ken. Welcome. We are waiting a few minutes for people to arrive.
Okay.
But I would invite you to turn on your camera if you're able, because we're going to be a small group. It will make us feel a little bit more connected. Um, And then folks are just dropping in the chat where they're joining from, and your favorite winter beverage. And I think we're going to give it until 3:05. So if you need to do a quick stretch or like get yourself some water or maybe not coffee this late in the afternoon, Lauren. I don't know if you're if you're a late in the day coffee drinker, but if you need to take care of yourself, you can also feel free to take a couple minutes now while we are waiting. Lizzie, do you like lots of little marshmallows or one big marshmallow?
Little ones, Robin. How dare you?
Okay, thanks, Charity. Drive safely, please. Um, I think the reason I don't like the little ones is because then they all melt into the hot chocolate, and I like it to still have a little bit of marshmallow to it.
That's the best part. And then you can taste them every single time you take a sip. All right.
Um,
Ken, you didn't tell us your fave beverage.
Favorite beverage? I don't know.
Favorite winter beverage.
Winter beverage.
Oh, mm,
Okay, peppermint tea. Nice. Great. We're going to give it one more minute and see if anyone else who registered can join. I know the after school time is hit or miss about people's availability. And we may have some people who join a little bit later also. Okay. Charity is embracing a cold beverage year round, which I appreciate. Um, okay, we're gonna get started. I hope a couple other people join us, and if not, this is an intimate group, so we will make time to privilege what you all are hoping to get out of it. Just to kick off with a little bit of an introduction, for those of you who are not familiar, New Visions is a nonprofit organization that works with schools in New York City. We have a core network of 71 high schools that includes 10 transfer schools. And then we also work with New York City Public Schools to provide services to schools across the city. My name is Robin Blanc. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a career readiness strategy manager on the team at New Visions. And my colleague Lizzie is here supporting with the chat and with other Zoom logistics. We're a small enough group that I will invite you to please drop any questions that you have in the chat as we're going, and I will definitely be responsive to them. And Lizzie dropped the deck into the chat before, and maybe you can do it one more time. So if you want to follow along, please feel free. So today, what we are aiming to do is to think about a student-centered approach to post-secondary success for seniors, specifically thinking about advising around pathways beyond the 2- and 4-year degrees that many of us feel most comfortable with. And thinking about specifically how to design a plan for your senior year caseload, thinking about either for this year or for next year. I wanted to do a quick temperature check to get a sense of people's familiarity. So we're going to be talking a lot about the New Visions Career Directory and the Pathways Advising Toolkit. And I would love it if folks could just drop in the chat on a scale of 1 to 4, are you brand new to it as a 1, or are you already using it regularly as a 4, or maybe in between? And for the person who just joined, if you're able to, I would invite you to turn on your camera because we're a really small group. It will help us feel a little bit more connected. And also, please feel free to just introduce yourself in the chat with your name and school. Okay, we got a 1 from Ken. Lauren's a 2 or a 3. Charity, I know you are driving, so I don't want to ask you to do anything that is unsafe. But if you have a minute and you are able to answer, let us know. And then again, for the person who just came in, would love to know your familiarity. Okay. I'm gonna move forward with the assumption that it's helpful to do demos and things like that. And then again, if for folks who are familiar with it, if you have particular sort of use case questions, let me know. So our agenda, we're doing a welcome. We're going to talk a little bit about an advising framework. We'll explore the Pathways Advising Toolkit, look at some student scenarios, talk through a senior year timeline, and then do a wrap up. And as I mentioned, we'll be wrapping the content at 4 and then leave 4 to 4:30 for any individual questions, student scenarios, thinking about how to really apply this in your school, places that you're getting stuck. So please, if you have any of those things, please feel free to stay on. Hi, Maria. Okay, so an icebreaker. And I would invite folks to either drop in the chat or because we're a really small group, please feel free to unmute yourself. Think back to when you were in high school. Was there a formative experience that led you on your career path? Anything that was particularly impactful for anyone?
Like a high school experience in the school or just like anything during your
I
age?
think anything,
Uh,
not just in school. I'll share mine while folks are thinking about it, which is that I grew up in Philadelphia, and when I was in high school, the Philadelphia school system was taken over by the state, which was something that was really like caused a lot of changes and led to a lot of sort of upheaval. And that was something that made me really interested in education policy and in equity. And so that really shaped for me my desire to continue doing that kind of work.
Northeast?
No, I went to Central.
Hmm.
Okay, Ken watched the movie Wall Street.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
Anyone else want to share something? Okay, Lauren. Um, yeah, Lauren's counselor made her feel like she wasn't going to get into a specific college. You are not the first person who said this when we've used this icebreaker. Um, and I think that's a real experience. And I think when we talk about this, one of the things that we think about, right, is that there are like lots of different influences that cause young people to have interests or goals. And some of them are sort of positive or affirmative, and some of them are reactive. And those reactive things can really be formative in setting people on a path. Um, so I sort of did a very, very small slice of a preview, but I want to talk a little bit about the advising framework that we use at New Visions when we're talking about career pathways advising. So first, just to start, when we're talking about career pathways advising or post-secondary career training programs, what are we talking about? I think sometimes people use the phrase trade school, but trade school can mean many different things, right? In New York, in particular, there are many free training programs funded by federal dollars or private philanthropy or both. CUNY also offers certification programs. There are many things that CUNY offers that I think if you have a young person who says, I want to go to trade school, they may not be thinking of CUNY, even though CUNY is offering many of those same programs. And then, of course, there are things like boot camps or apprenticeships that can help move people into union jobs. I'm curious what some of the programs are that people are already familiar with. If anyone has any that jump to mind. And if not, we'll dig much more into how to find out about them more later. Um, a couple that we hear a lot are Co-op Tech is one, right, run by New York City Public Schools. As CUNY, as we mentioned, offers some programs. Year Up is another example that people may have heard of. And no worries if you're not familiar, because we'll talk more about them, how to find more of them. So why is this something that we are focused on? The there's really, I think, at this moment, a challenge in the system where young people are saying that young people and families are saying that they want more or different options. And we know that there is a relatively large percentage of New York City public school students who are not moving directly into post-secondary education or training. Um, but there are, as we mentioned, this sort of world of opportunities for young people outside of the paths of the 2 and 4 year degrees. 63% of Gen Z says that they're open to options other than 4 year college. And there's studies that show that compared to a high school graduate that doesn't have any workforce training program, that people who do workforce training programs have higher lifetime earnings. So these programs are really an option that are making an impact. I also think one of the things that we're talking about when we think about this is really we're at a moment as we're considering sort of how we advise young people that we're thinking about really the like future of what work looks like. There are definitely, we know that jobs are changing, shrinking, expanding because of AI, but there's also a lot that we don't know. And one of the things that I think is a core idea of this for us and for this training is really thinking about how we're preparing young people with skills and preparation that they need to be successful over the course of their lifetime. Because we know, especially with these changes, but also sort of in our current economics of the last few generations, that people are not going to be in one job for their whole life. And so the best that we can do is use an advising framework about skills and how to help a young person navigate a career pathway based on those interests, goals, and skills. And I'm curious if they're sort of thinking about this framing and what brought you here today. Is there anything that you feel like you know are a demographic of students that you feel like you want to better serve, or a challenge that you're facing around this kind of advising that you feel like you want to improve in your practice? Okay, kind of saying non-college bound students, Lauren saying English language learners. Yeah, two um two big groups of students. Um great. So I will do a little bit of Lauren, for the English language learners, I'm going to do a little bit of when we do the demo, looking at that. And then if anyone else is thinking about this over the course of the training, let me know. Okay, so broadly, no matter where a young person's purpose and orientation are, when you're advising them about their next steps, you're probably thinking about a mix of these things, even if you're not using these exact words, right? Interests are, what does the young person want to do, right? This might be what field they're interested in, but also what excites them generally. Skills is, what are they good at, right? And for college, you might talk about academic profile as being something that creates a match around skills. For career training programs for non-college bound students, this also might be a set of things like their ability to show up on time or their ability to leverage their support system for success. Goals, we're usually talking about longer term goals. What do they want in the future? What do they want their life to look like? And priorities are all of the criteria and shorter term goals that a student has about what their post-secondary steps look like. What we want to emphasize here is that the first step in the advising process for students, regardless of what their next step is working with a student on their own reflection process around each of these things. And again, you don't need to be an expert in how to navigate a career path. But we will, over the course of this training, offer you resources for how you can research career paths with students to see where there might be a match. And also to really think about what are the ways that you are already having these conversations with young people, or who in your school is already having these conversations with young people, so that you can leverage these ideas for an advising conversation as it relates to a set of pathways, right? This is not something that we're saying standalone you're doing just in and of itself for your non-college bound students. So then to dig in a little bit more to the priorities as it relates to a student who's thinking about a set of non-college options, what's on this page is a set of criteria that a person can use to make a decision about whether a program is the right fit for them. And what I want to emphasize, this is a huge amount of things, right? No young person is going to care about all of these things. Every student is going to have a different set of priorities about what's important for them. But what I want to name is when we start to often, right, when I started as a college advisor in high schools, and when we talk to the college advisors in our network, people, when they're thinking about advising students around non-college options, sometimes start by saying, well, just tell me the 2 or 3 programs that are going to be good, right? I want to know what are the good options for my young people. And we're trying to shift that a little bit to say, there are actually a huge number of programs available. And our goal first is to help you see what are the breadth of programs available, because students have a really a real diversity of needs and goals. And we want to help you feel comfortable navigating with the young people how to assess whether a program is going to be a good fit for them or the right next step. And so we're really going to highlight a set of resources that will help you support your students to learn that information as part of their research and comparison process. Again, thinking about the sort of frame that I offered when we were talking about AI, that young people are going to have to navigate career paths over the course of their lifetime, and we can help build their skills to be effective researchers and self-advocates rather than just saying, here are the one or two programs. So just to give a couple of examples, when we're thinking about this, right, a young person, you might have a young person, we talked about the young person who like had an ability to show up on time, right? A young person who is not able to show up on time might need a program that has a little bit more wraparound support or a little bit more flexibility. Lauren, you mentioned your English language learners. If you have an English language learner, they might need a program that the eligibility supports someone who doesn't like that they don't need to do a placement test in order to get in. And you can imagine also a young person who really wants a specific career and they say, I want to do this job. My goal is to do this job. Each of those young people might have a different set of priorities that are going to shape which of the programs are the right fit for them. So having given that framing, I want to jump now to the Pathways Advising Toolkit. And dig into it a little bit more. So this toolkit is an integrated package that has both a set of resources for counselors and for students and a directory of programs that is searchable. And we really designed it with the feedback of our counselors in mind. So I'm going to turn in a second to actually demoing it, but I do want to just share the URL in the chat. It's free and open access. You don't need a login to get into it. And it also, I'll say, I think most of you are on computers, but it is it is mobile friendly. So someone can use it on a phone without issue. So let me just turn over to that screen. And so what I'm going to start with is showing the directory itself for how to look at programs. And then we're going to do a few student scenarios. And then I'll go into the resources a little bit more to demo what's there. So this is a directory. So let's just think about, there's a search bar at the top that you can use to search for any number of things. So, Lauren, this is actually a thing that I always demonstrate, but if you have a student who's an English language learner, I'm trying to think you could search for ESL, or I'm trying to think what the other code word is what the other keyword is. There are a few keywords, right? Like if you want to find a program that offers an internship, you could type that. You could also type a zip code. So if you work somewhere that's relatively isolated, you could search for a zip and see what are the programs in that specific zip code. And then I often recommend that people start with using the filters and picking a couple of filters. So I'll show this with a young person in mind who I worked with who wanted to do early childhood education. And she wanted a job relatively quickly. She didn't want a college degree. She was looking for free programs. And here I would select education and training. She lived in Brooklyn and would have also been open potentially to traveling to Manhattan. And she was 23 at the time that I worked with her. You can obviously adjust by length, and then we have some other criteria For example, if you want specifically programs for students with disabilities, I'll also highlight this filter if you have young people who are already working or who want to be working while they're doing a program that's open to applicants who are currently employed, is a good bet. So then if you click on a program link, and you might with a young person want to click on a few to look at them, you'll have a description of the program. This little check mark means that we spoke with the program directly to confirm the information. We aim to get the information updated every 6 months. We're in a sort of cycle of updates at this current moment. And then you have some information about the details of the program. So this is a relatively short-term program. They offer a stipend. They support people in becoming a teaching assistant. There's some information about the kind of job placement supports that they provide. And then information about what would it take to get admitted. So this is for a young person who's over 18. They can't have had a college degree, and they must be authorized to work in the US. This program is free. There's some information about the application steps. Timeline to start is a really helpful place to look to get a sense of, is this something that only recruits once a year? Is it something that is recruiting pretty constantly, as well as this around how likely it is that someone will get accepted? And then I'll highlight a few other features. So there's a map that you can use to get directions. And I would, right, this was a young person who lived in Brooklyn. I would open this up on Google Maps and say, is it reasonable for you to get to East Harlem for your for this training program? There are some related programs. And then we'll talk more about the resources later, but for all of the programs, you're going to see these same 3 things that have questions to ask a program, right? Thinking about those priorities that we shared before. What are the things that are most important to the young person? And what can they learn more about in researching the program? And then there's a comparison tracker and a transition and application and transition checklist. And then when the young person is ready to learn more, right, they're going to have to take some steps to do some additional research. And so the Learn More button will take them to the organization's page where there will be maybe some more detailed requirements, right? This names that they have to be English proficient and pass an ELA exam. And then it has upcoming dates and a direct link to apply. And you can also, if you click on the program name at the top, you can it will bring you to the organization's page where all of their programs will be listed. Before I give it to you all to do a little bit of exploring, I just want to highlight a couple other things. So first, what are the programs that we include, right? We're thinking specifically about programs that are an appropriate next step for a high school student who's looking at options for some kind of additional training or education. So this is programs that are for a good fit for someone who is out of high school and not enrolled in other school. So these are not programs that are for a current high school student or for a current college student. And we also focus on programs that are free or offered by a nonprofit or or public institution, with a couple of exceptions. The main one being that we have a few cosmetology programs at proprietary institutions, because that's a place that our counselors named was really important. We do on those have pretty detailed information about the costs and earnings and completion. And then the one other category of programs that we have is that we have a set of, if you scroll all the way to the bottom, we have a set of post-secondary advising and transition support programs for a young person who is graduating high school and needs some supportive next steps to land, support in their next steps to land somewhere. So knowing that many young people are graduating and high school counselors are not providing longitudinal support, there are a set of college access organizations that are open to high school graduates or young adults. So that's the demo of the directory itself. I want to give folks some time to do a little bit of exploring of it on your own. But before I do that, does anyone have any questions about the tool? Okay. And so I think Lizzie is opening up setting up breakout rooms. We're gonna do maybe 2 breakout rooms. And your task will be to meet with a high school senior who's unsure about their plans, with some interests, and help them use a directory to explore their pathways. And so the questions are, how would you guide this learner, given their interests, skills, priorities, and goals, to use the career directory to find 1 or 2 training programs? And then think about what other information would you and this young person need to make a good choice, right? This is not something that that you would be able to do everything on this tool itself. So what other things would you need? I am going to drop those instructions in the chat, and then I'm also going to drop the scenarios in the chat so that folks can reference them when they're in breakout rooms. Lizzie, is there anything else that you need to set up the breakout rooms?
Nope, we should be ready to go.
Okay, great. Welcome back. The other room is just wrapping up, so we will let them come back, and then I'd love to hear some sharing out. Okay, welcome back. I hope that this was useful, and I'd love to hear from a couple people what was new, and how did you think about a student's interests and skills in your recommendations? And then if there were any questions about the directory that came up as you were exploring, we can also answer those. So those are, and any of those things, feel free to unmute or drop it in the chat. Anything that anyone would want to share? Did folks find programs that felt like they were a good fit for? Okay, I see Lauren nodding. Anyone else find something that felt useful for the young person? Okay, I'm hoping. Yes. If you didn't find things that were useful, I would also love to hear more because that's helpful feedback. I do want to move on for the sake of time. So before we talk about the senior year timeline, I want to take a minute to show some of the resources that are in the directory because the timeline references a lot of them. When you are at the homepage, there are a set of student resources. And these resources really think about supporting young people over the course of their um, developmental journey, whether that's something over the course of their high school experience or thinking about someone in senior year. We do have some new student-facing videos that you can feel free to use. And then we have a set of things for awareness, thinking about that initial career exploration, thinking about what are their interests or their strengths. Exploration, really going deeper if someone's interested in a career, how you would find it. I always say also, if you have a young person that you want something and you're trying to find it in the directory and it's not there, that this is the place to go because it might be that that's a career that either doesn't have a training program associated with it, like flight attendant is an example of something that doesn't require college, but you're also not going to find a flight attendant training. Or things that really, do require college. And then preparation is going to link you back to those resources that I showed before about once you have a young person who's really using this tool, how do you navigate the options? I do want to show we have some resources for other pathways. So young people interested in the military, finding employment, a resource for undocumented young people, and a resource for young people who are graduating high school and not sure of their next steps. I'll show just so that you know, when you look at this, you'll see all of these have a Google Doc worksheet and a print and fill in worksheet. The print and fill in worksheet is because a student with an NYCPS email address can't access our Google Docs directly. It's something with the system. The Google Docs, if you have young people that you're working with, we really invite you to take these Google Docs, make a copy, share them with young people directly, add them to a Google Classroom or print them out. But we do have these two versions for that reason. And then for educator resources, if we look first at resources for supporting students, you'll see this is set in really the same way. But there are more things, including some more external resources and then really robust lesson plans for you to think about. And if we scroll down to the bottom of the page, you'll see all of the lesson plans are organized by what grade you could use them with. And these are sort of include a range of topics beyond just career pathways advising. And then in the other area in educator resources is resources for learning. So if you have other colleagues who are interested or you think might be able to benefit from using this tool, this has information that sort of walk through how to find programs, some guidance that we went over. So please feel free to share this, or if you feel like you want a refresher. Toggling back over to our senior year timeline, we are obviously in the middle of the year, peak application season. So I want to name first that our goal with this is not to be saying that you need to upend everything and change what you're doing in the middle of senior year. This is more for you to think about what are the ways that you might be able to build some systems or structures to support this work with your students this year. And really how to think about building in some of that self-reflection, exploration, research for all students. And I think for us, this is a place that I really want to name that this is really an equity question, right? Because if we wait until May for the students who didn't commit somewhere, or if we say we're only offering these options to the students who say, oh, I don't want to go to college, we're missing an opportunity to be supporting every student to understand all of their options. So looking at this outline, I'd love for folks to take a few minutes to think about, and then we'll share out which of these things are you already doing and what could you imagine adding this year? And what could you imagine adding to your work for next year if you're thinking about planning ahead. And I'll name again, right? We mentioned, I just showed where some of these resources are. So this is a place where you might think about, if you are doing some initial career exploration, that there are awareness and exploration tools. If you're thinking about a young person starting to identify some non-negotiables, that they might use a comparison tracker, or questions to ask a program. So I'm going to put this up. I'm going to leave this up for another minute so that folks can look through it. And then I invite you to start dropping in the chat what are some of the things that you're already doing, and what are some of the things that you feel like you have room to add to your process. So I would love to hear from anyone who's willing to share, um, what are you already doing in this? Okay, great. Lauren is adding using the comparison tracker. Um, where do folks feel like there are things on here that feel like something that is easy to add to an existing system? Like one example that we hear is that if you're having a college fair in the spring for juniors, that you could invite a couple of these programs to participate. Or if you do rep visits in the fall, that you could invite you could do a rep visit from one of these programs. Is there anything else that folks feel like they could add to their existing systems?
I think one thing that I would like to work on is my school is fortunate that we have a CBO that works with us. We have a Catholic Charities group, so trying to utilize them, because I know in STARS, we can designate someone who is not necessarily the guidance counselor to be the college and career advisor who does have that post-secondary planning meeting with them, but we're not good at asking other people to do that. It pretty much always ends up being the guidance counselors, which can be tough to get all of those meetings done in a timely fashion when you have to conduct a separate IPR. So it would be helpful if maybe somebody else was working on that with us, and also working on maybe entering some of that data, because that takes up so much time, as we all know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. And that points to this last question about who else can support with this. And I think one of the things that we always really want to push is for folks to think about who in the school is already having these kinds of conversations with young people, so that you can leverage that information, and where can you capture the information, right? Are you a school that uses the New Visions data portal? Are you using Overgrad or Zello? Are you, is it only, is the work happening in STARS? And then if you have a CBO, maybe it's going to be a little bit harder to figure out how to get them access to that information, right? Like there are some ways to think about what are the ways that you can share that. But also want to name Charity. What I heard you say is that like when you have routines in schools around who's doing the work, and there are folks that you have to onboard into it, that can be really hard, right? Like there are certain systems and structures, and trying to get new people to take on the work is something that takes some time and effort. Anything else that's coming up for folks around something that you either is like a small change that you could make that would leverage an existing system, or anything that you want to shift either for this year or for next year? Okay. We are almost at the end of our time for the content, so I want to shift towards a closing. And Lizzie is going to drop in the NYCPS attendance form into the chat, and also launched a poll, which we're going to ask people to complete. That's just for our reporting. Sorry, let me go back to the previous slide just so I can get the attendance tracker. Please make sure if you're an NYCPS, if you work in an NYCPS school, which I think you all do, to fill in the form so that you get credit for your participation. And thank you. I think we got I think we got everyone to respond to our poll. So, just a few other closing things. And again, just to say, I'm available to stay on. So for folks who have individual student scenarios that you want to talk through, or you want to think more about who else to bring into the work, please stay on at the end. But I would love to just help to Charity's point, what are things that you want to bring back now to your school or organization? Like, what's one next step that you think about that you can take, or one thing that you would say to a school leader or another counselor or a college and career advisor or 12th grade advisor? What's one takeaway or something that you would bring back to your school? And then I will close by sharing a few last resources. Okay, as you are thinking about your talking points, we have a newsletter that we invite you to join. We share resources monthly that come from our network or come from our best practices or our updates. So things like, this fall we shared a flyer that you could put up in your college office or college and career office for the directory. We share things like upcoming trainings and things like that. So please please feel free to join the newsletter. And if you want to access our archives, in the educator resources for learning, there's a link to the newsletter page there as well. We have an upcoming in-depth training at our office on February 3rd. So if you feel like you would like to go deeper on this, some of the content will be the same. But if you want an opportunity to go deeper, or you have someone else in your team who you think would benefit from that, please feel free to invite them or to come yourself. It's a full 3-hour training, so there's an opportunity to do this in more depth. And then lastly, we have 2 more virtual trainings coming up in the spring. One is focused on a little bit more on navigating the landscape of the training programs, thinking about how to build partnerships and relationships, and how to support students to transition. And then the last one is thinking about bringing this into younger grades. So we would invite you to join those trainings as well. It looks like this hybrid link didn't work, so give me 1 second and I will copy it into the chat for you. Otherwise, thank you for joining. I'm going to drop the attendance form in one more time just so that we make sure that you fill it out. And otherwise, I am going to stay on the call in case anyone has any other individual questions that you want to ask. Thanks so much.